time to get out of the comfort zone because these people aren't playing games.
We're going to organize. Humanity's going to come together. We are swinging muskets here, toe-to-toe with the globalists. They're bloodied. We're bloodied. It is absolute, total war. It's independent, it's teleprompter free, and it's coming to you from deep in the heart of Texas and going out worldwide. It's Infowars Nightly News. It is Monday, January 23rd, 2012, and we have a military officer and, well, really a very informative writer, Pete Kofod, joining us after the break that's coming up. Dealing with the fascist takeover of the United States that is taking place. So stay with us for that interview. It certainly ties in with the big TSA news concerning Rand Paul. But that's coming up in a moment. First off, the big news. And I interviewed a member of the European Union Parliament today concerning this on the radio show. European Union agrees on Iran oil embargo. That's right, and it pretty much kicks in today. No new contracts with any EU member of the European Union from any government. No one is allowed to buy oil from Iran. Iran sells more than half of its oil and then imports the gasoline back into the country. It's one of their main sources of funding. And Iran, via their official state television, has vowed to block the Strait of Hormuz, which the United States and NATO have said would be an act of war. The problem is that it's also an act of war to shut off a country's oil sales, an embargo. So things are certainly escalating big time on that front. We'll continue to watch that as it develops. Now, this morning at about 10 a.m. Central, well, Kurt Nimmo was the first person to notice it at Infowars.com. In fact, later we can show you DrudgeReport.com, where they've got a lot of the big reports on a wide spectrum of issues concerning the TSA posted right now. But Kurt Nimmo, got to give him credit, was the first to notice the Twitter feed of Congressman Ron Paul, who'd been contacted by his son via cell phone to let him know that he had been detained by the TSA. I was later able to talk to some of the people involved in Rand Paul's office, some of his crew, and they confirmed that he had later, after 2 hours, gotten on a plane and was able to get back to D.C. Now, if you click on the black link there that says Homeland detains U.S. Senator, you can read our article with Congressman Ron Paul's comments on it, calling it an out-of-control police state, with the TSA basically groping the population of this nation. He called it a police state in this country that is growing. Growing is the key word, like a cancer, out of control. But the issue here is, within about 30 minutes of Infowars posting this, we saw hundreds of other publications pick up on it and begin to say, like in the case of the New York Times, Ron Paul and Rand Paul are wrong. The TSA basically didn't detain Rand Paul. Now, this is the same TSA that over and over again gets caught lying, saying that there's no radiation in their scanners and that John Hopkins had signed off on it when they hadn't, or that they'd quit groping children under 12 and they never stop and they never quit, or that, oh, we're not groping little old ladies, and then later when they get sued, they have to admit, okay, they were actually strip searching them. So this is a group that lies continually, but when a senator like Dr. Rand Paul comes out and talks about what happened to him. Within minutes of it breaking, the corporate whore, New World Order dinosaur media comes out and basically implies that he is some type of liar. On top of all of this, it turns out that when a senator is going to Washington to vote, he cannot be arrested except for issues of treason. And here is from the Article 1, Section 6 of the Constitution. The senators and representatives shall in all cases, except treason, felony, and breach of the peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of the respected House and in going to and returning from the same. It's basically diplomatic immunity so that people can't trump up charges on them to stop them from being able to vote on a key piece of legislation. But if you expand on this, I have an article here out of the Daily Caller that was able to interview Senator Rand Paul, and he says that he was going through the scanner and it beeped. And then he said, look, I don't have any metal on me. Let me go back through it. And they said, no, you've been selected for a random check. And this has happened to me as well. To make you feel like you've done something wrong, the metal detector itself beeps. And then that's their pretext to search you. And it's come out that managers can sit there, especially with good-looking women, and hit the button themselves as a way to search you. And talking to some of the folks in Rand Paul's office, they are concerned he may have been singled out. But he goes on to report that he was shouted at and told, well, the quote was, I was barked at, do not leave the cubicle. And this went on for upwards of 2 hours, and he was told that he was detained. So he was basically under arrest in America. And now the White House has come out and said the TSA did a fabulous job, and we really support what they're doing. White House sides with TSA and Rand Paul standoff, as if President Obama or any of the White House criminals ever go through the slave training that goes on at these facilities. Continuing here with the TSA news, we're now seeing articles coming out from establishment outfits like Gawker saying that he is full of crap, well, they say full of SHIT, with absolutely no proof, because everybody knows the TSA never strip searches, never gropes children, never rips colostomy bags off people, never abuses anyone. Now, looking at what Congressman Ron Paul has said, he put out a statement today saying the TSA gropes and grabs our children, our seniors, and our loved ones and our neighbors with disabilities while doing nothing to keep us safe. The police state in this country is growing out of control. One of the ultimate embodiments of the TSA that gropes and grabs our children, our seniors, and our loved ones and neighbors with disabilities. The TSA does all of this while doing nothing to keep us safe. This is why my plan to restore America, in addition to cutting $1 trillion from the federal spending in the year, eliminates the TSA. We must restore our freedom, respect for liberty that once made America the greatest nation in human history. I am deeply committed to doing this as President of the United States. And I think it's a badge of courage that Rand Paul was accosted by these goons and did not submit to their pedophile behavior. Because, again, their groping of the children, as many psychologists have pointed out, is training children to accept being groped and fondled and raped. And the people working at the TSA, whether they are conscious of it or not, are violating federal and state law and are engaged in acts of pedophilia and sexual assault. Now, I want to go back here to a clip from last year with Congressman Ron Paul on my radio show / TV show, where he talked about the fact that he has been groped by the TSA and that what they do is absolutely outrageous. Here it is. Moving to the next subject, this radio show a month ago launched the exposure of the TSA with the new enhanced pat-down, kind of like enhanced interrogation, is torture. This is molestation. Now they admit they're sticking their hands in people's pants. Pistol tried to deny it yesterday when he was on ABC, but they reported that ABC reporters are having them stick their hands down their pants. I have witnessed men touching babies' crotches, so this is now confirmed, and I believe this is a catalyst for the eruption of the anger that the American people already have. Doesn't this violate the 10th Amendment? What are minimum wage federal employees doing, groping everybody? I mean, how did we go this far?
You know, it's hard to figure out. Who would have ever believed this? And the other day when I introduced my legislation to deal with this, I said, you know, I worry about the foreign policy, the spending, the Federal Reserve, our debt, and the whole mess, which are huge. But this one addresses something else. This one is just such an affront, so much out in the open, and government being so bold as to maul us in public and say they're doing it for our interest. If we tolerate this, there's something wrong with us. I mean, something wrong with it. It's almost like it's probably not fair to say this because so many people don't deserve it. We deserve, you know, some of this stuff if we don't do something about it, and hopefully the American people will do something. They'll eventually have to boycott the airlines or whatever, or throw more of the bums out. Maybe the Congress will get off their duff and do something in January and insist that we rein in the TSA.
Congressman, you know, a month ago, just with my own common sense, I said this new enhanced pat-down is meant to harass people into accepting the naked body scanners that Chertoff and others are openly making money out of. Now, Atlantic Monthly has talked to the TSA. They admitted that, yes, we want to intimidate people. So this is an act of harassment or sexual terrorism, in my view, and they admit it. Shouldn't there be congressional hearings about this? I mean, the method to the madness, if government can set the precedent to put its hands down your pants or remove a urology or colostomy bag, and they are doing this, that's confirmed, or to strip down 5-year-olds in full view. It reminds me of the Nazis. They started out with papers, please, in 1933. By 1940, it was stripping women down with babies and running them into pits and shooting them in the back of the head. We have the film footage of that. I mean, this is clearly to dominate us and to break our will, but I think they've gone one step too far. I think they've triggered the sleeping giant.
Yeah, let's hope so. It seems that way. Showing our papers, we've capitulated on that a long time because we show our Social Security number and our driver's license and the whole works. No matter what we do, get a job or buy something, they usually want those numbers. But now they want the government to show them our genitalia, and they want to take pictures of us and put their hands into our pants and all that. So that's hopefully enough to wake the people up. And what I think is great, you know, we complain a lot about the mainstream media, and they haven't been very friendly to us. But there's been a lot of good pictures on all the TV stations, you know, because it's been so abusive. So even though a fraction of the American people fly frequently, I'm sure almost all Americans now have seen some of these pictures and saying to themselves, hey, what's going on here? I mean, why are they doing this? So I think it's a healthy wake-up call to a lot of Americans. I just hope they can work that in to the whole concept of what's been going on with our country for a long time. Government is too big and intrusive and abuse our rights, and they do the things they shouldn't be doing, and they forget about the things they were instructed to do.
And just a correction, it's now 2012. I was saying last year. This is now over a year ago. This is in November of 2010, I guess 14 months ago, 13 months ago. Just incredible how time flies. And that's really when the big TSA issue broke as the biggest story in the United States. Thanks to Infowars.com, Ron Paul, but also DrudgeReport.com was on a daily basis carrying our articles, and it turned into this real-life drama with the TSA saying, we don't strip children, and these videos will come out daily showing it happen in full view of people. We don't strip search old ladies, and it would come out. We don't do this, we don't do that. And then here we are a year plus later, and it's still going on. Except now the TSA is running highway checkpoints and groping people. We have woken up in the middle of 1984. Continuing with Ron Paul News, because he's right at the center of everything. Ron Paul tops Twitter as most talked about candidate. He completely dominates all the other candidates, but that doesn't seem to matter because, well, Newt Gingrich can't get anybody to come to his campaign stops. He's had to cancel events in South Carolina, but he still won by a giant margin out there. And here's the article from Infowars.com by Steve Watson. Voter fraud, dead people cast over 950 ballots in South Carolina. And we've got a bunch of reports here about all the other craziness. People with broken seals on the ballot boxes, computer tapes, all sorts of craziness going on. Now in Iowa, it's admitted that they're just talking about not even giving Ron Paul any delegates. Doesn't matter if he got a bunch. They're just saying, that's the way it is, glitch. You know, the whole election's a fraud, but so what? Just trust us. We've got some of the quotes here from some of the Ron Paul people that were working inside of the election system, some of the things that they saw, and we'll put some of those up on screen for people. But Mr. Lawton then states that at 8 p.m., a precinct which he believed to be Prater Creek came into the office with the zero tape. The evidence that shows the voting machines were started at a vote count of 0. Without the zero tape, there is no certainty that the voting machines did not begin operation loaded with the votes for specific candidates, a very serious issue to say the least. But at 8:02, the Paul campaign called the elections office and was hung up on and given no information regarding the vote counting process. At 8:05, they report that the box of ballots arrived from box 216, which he believes was also from Prater's Creek. The box had a broken security seal. When Lawton asked for the serial number of the machine these ballots came from, he was told to wait. And it just goes on with standard craziness. Again, here's a report. South Carolina's Attorney General detects voter fraud and is reporting to the Associated Press that there is voter fraud. But so what? Just like Iowa, they admit they stole votes from Paul. So what? That's just the way it is. I've got some good news here, getting away from I'm dead and I voted. I'm a dog owner and I voted. The Supreme Court, actually doing something good, it's good to have occasional good news, says warrants needed in GPS tracking case. They stick GPS units on your car without a warrant, track where you're going, and the police also pull people over and grab their cell phone and download the contents. And the federal government, the Supreme Court is saying, you've got to get a warrant for that. Obviously you do, because it's a prior restriction. You know, they're running your personal data. A police officer can't run your license plate and background if he's not on duty. It's a serious crime. Why then can cities all over the United States have license plate reading software? I saw a report on the Associated Press today that I know Aaron Dykes posted at Infowars.com, a video report, where you almost think the video is a joke. The guy who's voicing the AP report says, in the latest pre-crime technology, if you're walking down the street at night, a red light can target you from a block away, just to let you know you're being watched. This is how we stop pre-criminals. And this town, every car is scanned through the license plate reading system. And you're watching it, and it's not 1984. It's not Brave New World movie, you know, a remake of the book or whatever, a film adaptation. It is the system just throwing total tyranny in your face. In fact, here's the report.
It almost looks like a scene from the science fiction movie Minority Report. A New Jersey city is going to start marking people with a red light before they might commit a crime. The police chief in East Orange, William Robinson, is embracing it as the latest pre-crime law enforcement technique.
Whereas London have talking cameras, we're about to deploy light projecting cameras, better known as light-based intervention systems.
The directed red lights will be attached to existing surveillance.
That's enough of this unbelievable propaganda. And then it goes into how great the license plate readers are. And you notice the police chief goes, London's got talking cameras, telescreens out of 1984 that shout at you. But we got live projecting cameras. And it's all about how they're going to keep you safe from drugs. The criminals that run the government are on record shipping in most of the drugs. And then they bust the low-level criminals that are robbing houses to get money to pay for the drugs. It's incredible. All right, getting into some other really crazy news. Is this life on Venus? Russian scientist claims to have seen scorpion in photographs. We're always getting weird news from Russian sources. I guess we get weird news from U.S. sources as well. But if that's a scorpion, I'm a Easter bunny. I mean, I don't know. But it is an interesting report because, you know, the truth is we have such amazingly corrupt governments that who knows what's true. I mean, it looks like there was water on Mars. We know there's ice caps on Mars. There's some evidence of life there. Maybe it was on Venus. Maybe it is a fossil. I don't know. It's certainly interesting. But I do have a quote of the day for you here as we go to break and come back with our guest. The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. J. Edgar Hoover. That was in 1956 Elks magazine. You know, I know right around that same time, J. Edgar Hoover said there was no such thing as organized crime. And that, of course, is because they were blackmailing him. But I gave advice to the cruise line that owns the ship that wrecked with the negligent captain in Italy. Do what our media does. Just say the ship didn't even exist and that didn't even happen. And if families are worried about dead family members, just say it doesn't exist, laugh at them and say you're a conspiracy theorist. And if there are any American tourists that watch mainstream television, they're so conditioned when they hear that if the television said, hey, you have a 5-year-old daughter, she doesn't exist, it's a conspiracy theorist, even though it's your own daughter, she came to your front door asking for help, they'd close the door and say, they say it's a conspiracy theory that you exist. They'd shut the door right on their own daughter. I'm not even joking here. They're like in a trance. So just say the ship doesn't exist and it's a conspiracy theory. And the trendies will actually do what you say because they'll follow any order as long as the establishment says so. All right, for more, subscribe at prisonplanet.tv. We'll be right back.
be stopped by any army or any government.
Welcome back to Infowars Nightly News. I want to look at the psychology now of the establishment that we have here in the West that is dog training us to basically submit to being treated like maximum security prisoners. That's what's happening with the tossing of our luggage and the groping of our wives and children at the hands of the TSA, now running checkpoints on the highway. And the bureaucratic class owned by the big offshore megabanks is teaching everybody, including House members and senators, that they are slaves, evidenced by the Rand Paul situation, detained for 2 hours, which is totally illegal. And now the New York Times is saying you weren't detained because the TSA says so, the same TSA that's been caught lying about groping children. Then they always say, well, we're going to stop now, and then don't stop. The same ones that said that those old ladies weren't strip searched. They've now apologized and admit they had. The same TSA that's come out and said, hey, Johns Hopkins University radiology department says no cancer risk from the scanners. And the head of the radiology department said, we actually put out a report saying there is a cancer risk. They're lying. They're counting on you basically just rolling over, playing dead, learned helplessness. That's what's happening. And we're going to be talking to Pete Kofod, consultant, researcher, journalist, here in just a moment about his article, The Rise of the Praetorian Class, here in just a moment, and how it ties into all of this. But I want to read a quote from his piece. As the Praetorian class ascends, the clear, albeit unstated message that emerges is that the actions and events in the economic class only occur with its tacit consent. Whether driving on roads, that's the TSA now taking over, traveling in the air, visiting public land, walking down the street, or even living in your own home. Every action you take is predicated on its permission. That's what licensure is. It's permission to do something that would be illegal. And it goes on. By preconditioning the populace to enforcement of its edicts, most of which are completely arbitrary, the Praetorian class sets itself up for a high degree of autonomy in its actions. This is confirmed by the fact that the consequences for malfeasance within the Praetorian class are almost never observed, and when it happens, it typically becomes a grotesque spectacle in which one or more is sacrificed as an example so as to keep appearances up of effective internal controls. And it's a lengthy article. It's all very, very well written. And he's really codified separately what I've just organically learned and tried to describe in my sputtering, long-winded fashion. But this is an act of just arbitrary control. It's about when we say jump, you say how high. It's about doing ridiculous things when your government masters order you to do so. It's ridiculous so they can take you 1,000,000 miles, not just, 5 or 6 inches down the road towards tyranny. And then even if you try to fight your way back towards liberty, they've taken you so far down the rat hole, you don't even really know what country you're in anymore. And that's why so much of the police state is Kafkaesque. They're not going with a velvet glove over the iron fist. It's meant to be over the top. Black uniforms, big sis, Homeland Security, more Orwellian than Orwell when it comes to surveillance. It's meant to be over the top. And that's a psychological tactic. And the article basically, it gets into this and a lot more. And so he's got a long bio. I think I'll let Pete, break down exactly what he wants to say about himself for you right here. And then we'll give him the floor for about 20 minutes to break down the Praetorian class. Pete, thank you so much for coming on with us today.
You bet, Alex. Good to be here.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about some of the research you do. And I see you're working on a lot of different websites, the best websites to visit to read more of your work.
Well, I wrote the article for Casey Research, and they do some spectacular work with contrarian investments, and really just, they sort of, from the financial perspective, line up a lot with some of the observations that you make, right? So they recognize that there's really just mass insanity going on, and they, sit there and they say, well, you know what, let's go in the other direction. So that's why I wrote it for them. And I don't work for them or anything like that. I just submitted the article, and they picked it up. And that's how it really came to be. And I guess you guys picked it up from there. A little bit about me is I run an IT consulting firm today. But before that, I was in the service, and basically went on active duty in the late 80s, and was on active duty through the mid 90s. And and actually ended up then joining the National Guard, here, right before 9/11. And one of the things that I guess that I've noticed is a disturbing trend over the last 20 years, and that is that the military has become, and I can speak much more to that from a personal perspective, the presence has become so much more patent. When I joined the service, it was pretty much an understanding that, the only time you really wore uniform was on post and, as you commuted to and from post, right? As you went about your business in the community, you did not wear a uniform, and it was meant to be understated because, and at least, the principle is that the show is not about you. And that has changed significantly. As we're seeing now that the TSA lines are, they have dedicated TSA lines for the members of the armed services. And, to say something against that is almost considered treasonous or heretical. But what they fail to understand, I think, is that it's actually a problem because it separates the military from the people that they're supposed to serve.
It's creating a new class system where senators get groped and citizens get groped, but you are the Praetorian Guard of the Emperor. You are, basically, you're not going to have your genitals groped.
And the real problem is that what that's going to do is it's going to change from this gratitude and fawning over the military to hidden contempt, and that's a really, really dangerous place to be. I've lived in countries where the military had played a significant role in government, and they are not viewed with a high degree of respect. They're viewed with fear, and that's just not the place that we want to go. So,
well, I agree with you, but as you know, in any third world country or despotic nation, the military is involved. And the secret arrest, the NDAA, all these things that are happening, the attempt to get rid of posse comitatus has gone on forever. Now they openly are overthrowing it. Again, you talk about the psychology of the Praetorian class, where it's there to condition us just to acquiesce to anything. Speak to that. Let's get into more of your article.
Sure. So, there's a few things that the Praetorian class that you can always count on them for, and that is that their entire mindset is geared towards their martial duties, right? So they are their conversation, everything, and that leads to the next really identifying trait, and that is that they really socialize internally. So it's not necessarily that the Praetorians class wants to control. They're sort of almost they're the amoral enforcer of the edict of the political class. And that's the part that's significant, is the fact that they're separate from the political class. They sort of view themselves as standing outside of the entire environment and sort of serving as the traffic cop, just directing, the life. they're not from the community. They are outside of it. And it's the political classes really very, very odd and very, I don't know, how would I put it? It's a very tenuous relationship that they have with the Praetorian class, because the Praetorians view them with contempt, and the political class will throw the Praetorians under the bus at any second, right? Because they're really just tools to be used for their objectives. And so as a result, but one of the things that you do learn in that environment, and that is that physical imposition and physical dominance and intimidation is what you want, because one, it puts you in a position where you can protect yourself, and so that's what you see with the buzz cuts, the large demeanor and sort of the angry demeanor. It has to do with control, because if you can control people that way, you can reduce the risk to yourself. And so that's what we're seeing.
And then the military works for these new modern emperors, the mega banks. And so now we see militarization of police. But the TSA is a Praetorian class. They're more of like this little wimpy bureaucratic system, but they're actually putting their hands on you. They're going in your pants. I mean, this is about total physical domination.
I think it is. I mean, I don't know much about them except for when I travel. I view them with a decent amount of contempt. But the thing that's very, very interesting about them is I've just realized they're not actually law enforcement officers. They're not sworn officers. I did not know that until recently. Were you aware of that?
Yes, I was. They call themselves federal officers, and Congress is trying to pass a law so they can't use that term. It's government had to create a whole new bureaucratic class outside of the old schools of military and police, because even though it's been corrupted slowly, there's still such bedrock connections to history, esprit de corps, Constitution, Bill of Rights, commissioned officers, that you don't engage the American people. They kind of created more of a brown shirt mob like Hitler did to just occupy the country. And that's now what they're doing with highway checkpoints. And of course, we probably should have described, my fault, that the whole Praetorian model comes out of Rome, as the only military force allowed in Rome. That was more of a house guard of the political class. We probably should have given people a brief history lesson on that to even know what we're talking about.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's our fault. But
so, it's interesting because, I'm sort of, a big believer in Occam's razor, and that is that, the simplest and most obvious answer is normally correct. And so if you sit there and, one of the reasons why I sometimes question very, very, very convoluted justifications for certain things happening, but there's a flip side to that. And that is that if a system is, its stated objective continues to fail at its stated objective, yet the system survives, then, to quote Ayn Rand, I mean, whenever you think you're facing a contradiction, you have to check your premises. And we have to check the premises, because if what they say consistently is incorrect, yet they're allowed to continue the same way, you have to wonder, well, does that really make sense? I don't know if that makes it. The point that I'm trying to make there is you have a military class, or you have this Praetorian class that engages in some very stated noble ideas, but yet you see these I guess, somewhat underhanded techniques and tactics being employed. You have to wonder, is that really an accident? Is it really a one-off? Or is that really a pattern that's emerging? And I mean, I think that's what the discussion is.
Well, previously in our republic, as you know, the police investigators and others were not military, were not Praetorian. They were more of a peace officer, part of the community. Now they have militarized them or turned them into Praetorian. And what did we catch them doing? Shipping guns into Mexico to blame the Second Amendment. And so then there's this argument in the Praetorian class, well, we've got to have these gambits so that we can protect you. But it's not really about protecting us. It's about overthrowing our real form of government.
The concern that I have is that, we've moved from a republic through a democracy. And I actually think that we have now become a bureaucracy in the true original sense. And that is that we now have a variety of institutions that sort of operate unelected officials really accountable to nobody. And so they have been tasked to take whatever, law is passed by Congress, and now they have to implement them. And so there's really there's no natural mechanism to push back to say, you know what, you've overstepped now. And so that's the real concern. And if you look at the word bureaucracy from its original intent, it's the rule from the desk. And so what you now have is you have these little desk rulers that are not accountable to anybody. And it's not even necessarily a monarchy. It's just, I don't know what's more frightening, if it was organized or the fact that it's spontaneously being allowed to evolve that way.
Well, I mean, it's a fear-based culture, too. Statistically, you've got a better chance dying from a champagne cork or a honeybee sting. These are real numbers than terrorists. But you would believe that millions of Americans have been killed by terrorists, and it's imminent death. And this idea that the federal government has jurisdiction everywhere and it must get rid of all danger and all threats everywhere and be omnipresent. Well, A, that's not feasible. And B, it's just really a giant unconstitutional power grab.
You're absolutely right. The whole idea of that there's risk mitigation and then there's risk elimination. And so I think it's almost like we have set ourselves up for this by talking about how risk can be completely eliminated in life. And so whenever you say, I want you to eliminate all risk, somebody will gladly say, I'll eliminate all risk. Just give me everything you got. And that's what happens.
Yeah, the only person who isn't at risk of something is somebody, I guess, chained up in a dungeon.
Yeah, death is the only position of no risk.
You're right. I mean, this is a long article, and you get into a lot of different facets. You've got the floor. I mean, break down this rise of the Praetorian class and why you think the technocrats are pushing for this. Okay, well, one of the things that I think is I think it's been going on for a long time, right? I mean, because, the argument, the opening argument that I make in the article is that everybody is always like talking about the upper, the middle, and the lower class. And I say, while that might be a fair way to categorize people, it really has some significant flaws with it. Number one is that it's a completely arbitrary classification, which lends itself to the class warfare that we're seeing, because somebody's upper class is somebody else's middle class, and then, and so those boundaries are completely vague, and it really lends itself to an us versus them type of an environment. Rather, I say, let's go ahead and break it up where you have a productive class. I call that the economic class. And those are, people that voluntarily participate in the economy, go out and provide services for which they're compensated. Then you have the political class, and the political class are the ones that have figured out, you know what, I can, basically assemble a bunch of, people with guns and say, you know what, tell me, I'm going to figure out a way in which I can sort of rule these people and I can skim off the top. And as that racket continues, they have to develop sort of an enforcement arm, very similar to the way the mob works, where they have to have enforcers that to go out there and collect the protection money. And so that's what develops eventually into, initially you just have this small, protection arm, and eventually they become a class completely onto their own because the dragon has been fed that much. And so I go through and I describe what that Praetorian class looks like, right? It's largely going to be your military and your primary law enforcement, but it also becomes, when you have the Department of Education with a SWAT team, good grief, what's that all about? And, all these other entities that now, feel that they have to belly up to the bar because they want to, really want to raise the game. And it's very, very, very frightening. And because there's so much noise in our culture today, people don't even take the time to notice it. And inherently, human beings are very adaptable to change. So they don't really have the mechanism where they can say, what was it like 20 years ago? But you pull up a TV show for 20 years ago, and then all of a sudden there are things that kick in, or some kind of a scent, or something that triggers your long-term memory, and you say, you know what? That was a time where things were simpler. There was not so much noise, there was not so much hysteria, and there was not so much fear. And so that's sort of the point that I make in the article, is that, and these things really don't end well. I don't think that it either ends because they run out of money, or everything just implodes. And, because an organism like this will not restrain itself naturally. It just will not. You don't come in and say, you know what, we need fewer police officers. We need fewer, we need a smaller military. It instantly becomes a land grab, almost like the way the piranhas get.
during the dry season is, the water lowers and man, they get aggressive because now you're moving into their turf. And so it really has to be, I believe the only way that you can land this thing safely is that you slowly have to pull back on the cash. That's the only way it's going to work.
Now, again, I want you to continue because in the second half of this interview, this is where we're getting to the real meat and potatoes. You're right. This does not end well. In every case in history, once the bureaucracy and gets this big, once it hires a bunch of enforcers, it will basically cannibalize. And as things get worse, it will then start mass arrest and the persecutions. I mean, we know A to Z the progression of this, and I get chills thinking about it with small children. And the technocrats admit, well, this stuff's failed before, but we've got, tens of thousands of drones, and we've got, high-tech propaganda, and we're going to be able to complete this. And so they're going to shake old ladies down for taxes they don't owe. They're going to take property. They're going to literally implode things and wreck the society. And we see that happening now. So you say we land this by cutting the money off. Well, Ron Paul's trying to cut the money off slowly, and they're acting like he's the devil.
Very, very disturbing, and that's the problem. They get to cozy up to that big table with lots of food on it, and lots of cash that's been printed, and all of a sudden, it's nice and toasty in here. I don't want to go back out in the cold. And so I think that's what happens, to the political class. And that's another thing I talk about is where the political class is. What do you have? You have the politicians. Then you have, their lackeys, the lobbyists, and then you have the government business entities or even corporations who say, you know what, instead of actually going out there and competing in the marketplace, I'll just use a lobbyist to get my stuff stuck in there. And that's actually, the part that's probably the most concerning is because what you see is literally just a revolving door, politician to lobby to corporate, back, boom, boom, boom. And so there's really no incentive for anybody to say, you know what, who wants to stop the self-licking ice cream cone, right? So it just keeps on going.
But we can see that it's degenerating now. Yourself, an Army officer, talking to military people. Overall, are you seeing them starting to have some concern and recognize this system we're entering?
Very much so, and that's those are some of the things I think that I guess as an entrepreneur I'm an eternal optimist, is that when I talk to them they recognize these things because the vast majority of them are good people, and every organization will have its psychopaths that enter the fold, but by and large these are honorable people. They may not have been taught to recognize, or they've sort of it's been groomed out that you don't really look too far outside your lane. But I mean, they have a sense of what's right and wrong, and on top of that, everybody in their heart of hearts, when they're sitting in by themselves in the quiet, they know when something's wrong. And so when I talk to them, the emails that I've been receiving from friends who read the article, they said, you know what, you're dead on. And I said, this is very concerning. And I've gotten a ton from law enforcement. These are guys that, we're talking 27-year law enforcement veterans that are saying, this is very, very concerning. And because they remember what it was like. Now, there may be probably there's a significant amount of positive bias in there because they probably wouldn't write me to say that I was completely wet. But at the same time, I really haven't gotten anybody sending me an email that said, you know what, you're completely off base, blah, 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 blah. Everybody has said, you know what, these are very, very disturbing trends, because that is just not what the principles of America are based on.
Exactly. Let me raise this point. They wouldn't allow DU to be used in warfare, according to the former head of the DU program, Dr. Doug Rocky, and others I've talked to, and I've seen the documents, until 1991. And suddenly they said, well, it's okay to use it a little. And then now they don't even act like there's really, any concerns about its widespread use. Previously, they were concerned, government was concerned about radiation from reactors that had melted down. Now the EPA just raises the level of what they say is safe radiation when Fukushima radiation blows across the Pacific. I've seen articles in the Associated Press just yesterday where all over the U.S. they're developing airborne Ebola, mouse pox, flu that kills over 90% of those that come in contact with it. And it's not even being kept in secure facilities, much less why is it being manufactured. And there's almost like a reckless craziness going on. Like a few years ago in China, they executed a bunch of executives because they were putting melamine in powdered milk because it would fool the tester for the protein level, and it killed people. Well, it killed some people here and made them sick. And I can pull the article up where the EPA just came out and said, or the FDA in that case, well, more melamine is just okay for you now. So, I mean, you talk about going crazy. It's like there's not even a self-preservation mode within the elite. They just think a big army is going to save them from an angry public. What about an army saving us from them? I mean, you know, all that, it just seems that there is a real Caligula type craziness now entering into the behavior of the ruling class.
And it's not coordinated. I don't think it is. I don't get a sense that it's coordinated because it just seems so arbitrary and random. I mean, it's, you know, I think what you're saying too is exactly, it's crazed. And so what you're seeing is these different things that are popping everywhere. And that's just, I mean, that's, you know, way more about that than I do, Alex. The only thing I wanted, the big part of my article that I wanted to comment on was this slow but inexorable change and slide that we have seen where the law enforcement and the militarization has just become, you know, so much more prevalent in the American experience, and nobody's asking the questions why. That was really the big point that I wanted to make with my article.
Well, they tell us it's for Al-Qaeda, but then you get the Homeland Security documents and MIAC reports that police and others have sent us, and it's all about keeping the American people in line. There's not even a pretense that it's for jihadis or somebody.
I think it's just, I mean, it's just bizarre, you know? I mean, you see small towns in, you know, out in the Midwest, and they've got, you know, 2 police cars, but they've got, you know, tons of SWAT gear in the trunks of their vehicles. I mean, what happened to the days of Barney Fife with his one magic bullet in his pocket, you know?
Meanwhile, I saw a number just a few days ago where there's more deaths every year on just the Texas Mexico border than there is in Afghanistan on all sides. But then, because that's something the system doesn't want to discuss, that's not even a news item. So like a real war is not a big deal, because that's something that the system doesn't want to discuss. But then meanwhile, you've got cops, like you said, in the middle of nowhere, shaking in fear. I've seen these videos out of Tennessee and Florida where families drive up at federally run checkpoints, and the state police are out in Tennessee with their drill sergeant hats, shaking like the next car is going to have the devil fly out of it or something. I mean, like there's just terrorists everywhere. It'd be like if I ran out in a field crazed and thought that I was going to find a magic leprechaun over a hill. I mean, it's just, it's not connected to reality.
That's the part that I think is just, you know, the whole, you know, you always talk about, well, are we really arraying resources against realistic threats?
Yeah.
And I would say, you know, no. But
where can we read more of your reports, and where can we find out more about what you're writing about?
So I wrote, you know, it's funny, I wrote another article a couple of weeks ago called Fascism for Dummies. And it was posted on a website called The Dollar Vigilante that's run by a Canadian named Jeff Berwick, who lives in Acapulco. And that that article really was sort of I guess is the intro to this article. And the word fascism gets thrown around a lot, and it gets thrown around, you know, frankly, many times in an incorrect manner. And the point that I wanted to make was, you know, really there's some core things about fascism that if you recognize that, you can step away from all the rhetoric, you can step away from all the screaming, and you can say, well, that's the way fascism works. And, you know, and fascism basically is sort of an unprincipled method of government, meaning it's governed by no principles. It's really only exists for self-preservation, and you'll typically see that it involves a very, very I guess, perverse relationship with the market, meaning that they have, preferred vendors and providers that they then will subsidize. And sometimes they'll claim that they're pro-market, and yes, we're all about the market. And then other times they'll say, no, we need to put the kibosh on that because of the good. And it's completely arbitrary. It's whatever is in their own self-interest. It has nothing to do with being governed by principles that really transcend them. So the name of it, as I said, the article was called Fascism for Dummies. It's a quick little 3-page primer. And the idea was, read it and, maybe they'll put a little context into, all these articles you read about fascism. So that was another article I wrote, and I'm in the process of writing some more articles that I'm probably going to submit out either through the Dollar Vigilante or Casey Research.
Well, very exciting, Pete Kofod. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And anytime you want to send something over to Infowars.com, we'd certainly like to post it as well, because you've certainly done a great job in these articles that I've read, really breaking down some of the nuances of this. But simply put, fascism, from my research, is pretty much what you always get. The communist, the socialist, they're just putting names on it. But if you want to use a modern term, fascism is more rule by gangs, special interest, combines, cartels. That's basically what we've got here is a purer form of fascism that we're segueing into, whereas communism kind of kicks off one way, but pretty much always devolves into fascism, special interest. There's no doubt we've got a planned economy now that is consciously moving towards that. But at the same time, it's so badly coordinated, and the elites are so undisciplined that it's going to be wild. Undoubtedly,
it's going to be a mess.
Oh, yeah, we're about to see insanity. And if they think a bunch of guns and black uniforms are going to somehow, and a bunch of drones are going to fix their own people not coming into work and stealing everything, I mean, I hope we just collapse like a third world country. I hope that we got the country back and go back to the republic, but it'd be better to just collapse into a banana republic than to become this big evil fortress empire Borg system that I think the establishment thinks they're going to have.
There's nothing wrong with an edifice collapsing, provided you're not standing right next to it.
Exactly. Hey, thanks a lot for joining us.
No, you bet, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you. What a great guy. He sat there for about 20 minutes because I was late getting here before he went to the interview, but that's a good way to end Infowars Nightly News. That's it for this edition of the broadcast. I hope that all of you out there realize that at this critical juncture, your voice is more important and powerful than ever. We're not going to defeat this tyranny through osmosis. That, well, Alex Jones is out there, and Ron Paul's out there, and Rand Paul's out there, and J. Edward Griffin's out there. Sure, we're out there and we're prominent voices, but without you telling your friends and family about what's happening, without you pointing them at the radio show and the TV show, without you supporting constitutionalists who are at the tip of the spear in the face of this global takeover, we don't have a shot. We don't even have a prayer, a hope. You do see a big awakening happening in the face of this bizarro tyranny. I mean, it is classical. Like he said, a lot of people use the word fascism. This really is fascism. And I mean, the nastiest, most disgusting form of it I've ever seen. And here's the thing. This fascism is just now learning to walk, but it's growing quick. It's going to be full grown very, very soon. It's kind of like the 1979 movie Alien, where it bust out of the guy and 12 hours later is man-size eating people. And they're like, my God, how did it get so big so quick? That's the thing about the life cycle of a scientific tyranny like this, is that it took a long time to get implanted inside the republic and grow as that embryonic level. Now it's basically busting out of us, here on the table and looking around, and people are going, wow, Alex Jones was right. There is something growing in there. Oh, but it's kind of little. Look, it just ran off. Let's get some little cattle prods and go deal with it. No. It's already gone around the back hatch, folks, and is 8 feet tall and got teeth that long, okay? All right? We tried to stop it when it was in the guts. Everybody's like, oh, there's nothing going on in there. You know, never mind this tyranny, this national security state that attached itself to our face. And now that's kind of fallen off and laying there. And then now the country's got the depression going, and you know, they're passing the NDAA, and people can see the little alien popping out. Yeah, here it is about to happen over here. And now the denial can stop. But here's the deal. Okay, this tyranny's busted out, but it's only 2 feet long. No, it's around the passageway, folks. It's 8 feet tall, and it's got 5-inch teeth dripping with acid. So what a way to end the show. Yeah, we'll go to it busting out right here for folks. Oh, there we go. And I guess this must not be the director's cut because it's really not. Oh, here he comes. Here's the Homeland Security being born. And, of course, we told everybody that it was not going to be nice. Oh, my God, the TSA's setting up checkpoints. Oh, look at it. It's keeping us safe from Al-Qaeda. All right. I think that's it for Infowars Nightly News. I guess I'm not patriotic. No, I don't think that's my president. I don't think that's my leader. Oh, look, they stop him from stabbing it because the science division wants to get it as a weapon program. Oh, no. Don't worry, the NDAA is not a big deal. Don't worry, all the corruption, the tens of trillions stolen, just let it run off into the dark. Everything's fine. Never mind that governments have killed so many people in the past. You can see the dead corpses lying around the world in history. The problem is the public's waking up because they think they're fighting a little 2-inch, shrimp. But when they get around the corner and go, oh, it's big, a lot of people are going to turn tail and grovel to something that's a eugenicist. It wants to kill us. It's not going away. I think this transmission's gone full circle. Lord willing, if I'm not in some FEMA camp by tomorrow, I'll see you back tomorrow here at 7 p.m. Central for Infowars Nightly News. Great job to the crew. Oh, yeah, they're showing on screen there. You can get a 15-day free trial, 100% access to 9 years of material at prisonplanet.tv and support the front lines of the Infowars. So, again, it's an armory of resistance. Get in there and get the tools we need to fight the psychos that have taken over our society. That's Infowars Nightly News.